Good morning, MacLaren. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. The weather today looks sunny, high near 70 degrees. Looks sunny and dry through the week, and then there will be different kinds of moisture, rain and snow expected through the weekend and into next week. The sun rose at 6:33 a.m. and will set at 7:29 p.m. I'm going to skip other announcements today in order to have time to read you a portion of what we all agree is the greatest children's book of all time. I'm so glad you agree with me about that. Thank you for joining me in loving and admiring Eleanor Farjon's exquisite and delightful Elsie Piddock Skips in Her Sleep. A couple of little references in the book. Glynde is a village in Sussex in the south of England. Mount Caburn, they just call it Caburn a lot, is what they call a mountain in the south of England. Because you are Colorado kids, you know what a real mountain is, but that's what they call a mountain. At a certain point in the story, we begin to hear about the Lord. This is a guy, not a god. He has a title, like Lord Smith, Lord Jones, which for our purposes just means that he is rich and powerful. Okay. Um, and I will just hold up the book so you can see some of Charlotte Volk's lovely illustrations on occasion, but mostly I will just read to you. Elsie Piddock Skips in Her Sleep by Eleanor Farjon. Elsie Piddock lived in Glynde under Caburn, where lots of other little girls lived too. They lived mostly on bread and butter because their mothers were too poor to buy cake. As soon as Elsie began to hear, she heard the other little girls skipping every evening after school in the lane outside her mother's cottage. Swish, swish went the rope through the air. Tappity tap went the little girls' feet on the ground. Mumble umble umble went the children's voices, saying a rhyme that the skipper could skip to. In the course of time, Elsie not only heard the sounds, but understood what they were all about. And then the mumble-umble turned itself into words like this. Andy spandy, sugary candy, French almond rock, bread and butter for your suppers, all your mother's got. The second bit went twice as fast as the first bit, and when the little girls said it, Elsie Piddock, munching her supper, always munched her mouthful of bread and butter in double quick time. She wished she had some sugary candy French almond rock to suck during the first bit, but she never had. When Elsie Piddock was 3 years old, she asked her mother for a skipping rope. "You're too little," said her mother. "Bide a bit till you're a bigger girl, then you shall have one." Elsie pouted and said no more. But in the middle of the night her parents were wakened by something going slap, slap on the floor, and there was Elsie, in her nightgown, skipping with her father's braces. That's the English word for suspenders. She skipped till her feet caught in the tail of them, and she tumbled down and cried. But she had skipped 10 times running first. "Bless my buttons, mother," said Mr. Piddock, "the child's a born skipper." And Mrs. Piddock jumped out of bed full of pride, rubbed Elsie's elbows for her, and said, "There now, dry your tears, and tomorrow you shall have a skip rope all of your own." So Elsie dried her eyes on the hem of her nightgown, and in the morning, before he went to work, Mr. Piddock got a little cord just the right length, and made 2 little wooden handles to go on the ends. With this, Elsie skipped all day, scarcely stopping to eat her breakfast of bread and butter, and her dinner of butter and bread. And in the evening, when the school children were gathered in the lane, Elsie went out among them, and began to skip with the best. "Oh!" cried Joan Challen, who was the champion skipper of them all. "Just look at little Elsie Piddock, skipping as never so." All the skippers stopped to look, and then to wonder. Elsie Piddock certainly did skip as never so, and they called to their mothers to come and see. And the mothers in the lane came to their doors and threw up their hands and cried, "Little Elsie Piddick is a born skipper." By the time she was 5, she could outskip any of them, whether in Andy Spandy, Lady, Lady, Drop Your Purse, Charlie Parley Stole Some Barley, or whichever of the games it might be. By the time she was 6, her name and fame were known to all the villages in the county, and by the time she was 7, the fairies heard of her. They were fond of skipping themselves, and they had a special skipping master who taught them new skips every month at the new moon. As they skipped, they chanted, "The high skip, the sly skip, the skip like a feather, the long skip, the strong skip, and the skip all together. The slow skip, the toe skip, the skip double, double. The fast skip, the last skip, and the skip against trouble." And here are the fairies with their fairy master, their skipping master. All these skips had their own meanings and were made up by the skipping master, whose name was Andy Spandy. He was very proud of his fairies, because they skipped better than the fairies of any other county, but he was also very severe with them if they did not please him. One night he scolded Fairy Heels a Lead for skipping badly, and praised Fairy Fleafoot for skipping well. Then Fairy Heels a Lead sniffed and snuffed and said, "Hmm, hmm, hmm. There's a little girl in Glynn who could skip Fleafoot round the moon and back again. A born skipper she is, and she skips as never so." "What is her name?" asked Andy Spandy. "Her name is Elsie Piddick, and she has skipped down every village far and near, from Diddling to Wannock." "Go and fetch her here," commanded Andy Spandy. Off went Heels a Lead, and poked her head through Elsie's little window under the eaves, crying, "Elsie Piddick, Elsie Piddick, there's a skipping match on Caburn, and Fairy Fleafoot says she can skip better than you." Elsie Piddick was fast asleep, but the words got into her dream, so she hopped out of bed with her eyes closed, took her skipping rope, and followed Heels a Lead to the top of Mount Caburn, where Andy Spandy and the fairies were waiting for them. "Skip, Elsie Piddick," said Andy Spandy, "and show us what you're worth." Elsie twirled her rope and skipped in her sleep, and as she skipped she murmured, "Andy Spandy, sugarty candy, French almond rock, bread and butter for your suppers, all your mother's got." Andy Spandy watched her skipping with his eyes sharp as needles, but he could find no fault with it, nor could the fairies. "Very good as far as it goes," said Andy Spandy. "Now let us see how far it does go. Stand forth, Elsie and Fleafoot, for the long skip." Elsie had never done the long skip, and if she had had all her wits about her, she wouldn't have known what Andy Spandy meant. But as she was dreaming, she understood him perfectly. So she twirled her rope, and as it came over, jumped as far along the ground as she could, about 12 feet from where she had started. Then Fleafoot did the long skip, and skipped clean out of sight. "Hum," said Andy Spandy. "Now, Elsie Piddick, let us see you do the strong skip." Once more Elsie understood what was wanted of her. She put both feet together, jumped her rope, and came down with all her strength, so that her heels sank into the ground. Then Fleafoot did the strong skip, and sank into the ground as deep as her waist. "Hum," said Andy Spandy. "And now, Elsie Piddick, let us see you do the skip all together." At his words all the fairies leaped to their ropes, and began skipping as lively as they could, and Elsie with them. An hour went by, 2 hours, and 3 hours. One by one the fairies fell down exhausted. and Elsie Piddick skip on. Just before morning, she was skipping all by herself. We'll pick up there tomorrow. So, all of you, keep tending to your victory gardens. Keep a pleasant schedule. Keep a good routine. Get plenty of fresh air and exercise. Be a helper to your family, please. Please don't quarrel with your siblings. If it is your birthday today, April 7th, 2020, happy birthday. I hope you have a day of kindness, friendliness, and peace. We are all in this together. See you next time.